The metallic clang sent a shockwave through Elias, his breath catching, the world blurring into a phantom battlefield. Years ago, his camera had captured the brutal grace of war. Now every sharp sound was a tripwire into the chaos he'd escaped. This garden, his quiet sanctuary, was his fragile shield against the echoes of oblivion. Elias was a ghost in the Redemption Grove Community Garden, a place ironically named for a salvation he felt he could never achieve. At 47, his presence was more an impression than a certainty, a whisper of movement at the periphery of other people's busy lives. He materialized at dawn, when the city was still a low hum, and vanished by dusk, leaving behind only the evidence of his quiet, obsessive labor. He had once been a man who ran toward the thunder of conflict, a celebrated war photographer whose work had captured the raw, brutal, and fleeting grace of humanity on the edge of oblivion. His portfolio had earned him a Pulitzer nomination, but the price was a piece of his soul, chipped away with every shutter click. Now, the ghost of that thunder lived inside him, a permanent resident in the hollows of his memory. A car backfiring on the street, a dropped metal trowel, any sharp, percussive sound could ambush him. The world would dissolve into a cacophony of remembered screams and the smell of dust and cordite. His heart would hammer against his ribs, a frantic prisoner seeking escape. His hands, which had once held a camera with rock-steady precision in the midst of chaos, would tremble. That camera, a cannon that felt like a phantom limb, now lay disassembled in a cardboard box under his bed, its lens as dark and void as a sealed tomb. He had traded the world for this small patch of earth in the city's green lung. Specifically, he had claimed the garden's most neglected corner, a forgotten triangle of land behind the large composting bins where the soil was poor and sunlight struggled to pierce the overgrown privet hedge. It was a place no one wanted, which made it perfect. Here, among the weeds and the city's cast-off junk, Elias found a new, silent medium. He became a scavenger, his pre-dawn walks through quiet alleys a form of pilgrimage. He'd return with his pockets full of treasures, the jagged rim of a cracked tire, the shimmering fragments of broken bottles, a handful of rusted screws. Each piece was cleaned with a reverence that bordered on ritual. He worked with the detritus of a careless world to build a meticulous one. The tire rim became the curving wall of a miniature fortress. The glass shards, the deep green of wine, the clear of gin, the brilliant, hopeful blue of skyy vodka, were laid piece by piece to form the bed of a silent, glittering river. A delicate bridge, painstakingly bent from a single piece of rusted baling wire, spanned this glassine stream. His masterpiece, nestled under the protective shade of a wild rose bush, was a tiny cottage built from weathered brick chips. Its single window was a circle of thick, sea-green glass from the bottom of an old Coke bottle. When the afternoon sun slanted just right, it cast a soft, ethereal glow onto the packed earth floor within, a tiny beacon of peace. Nearby, a lone bench fashioned from 2 acorn caps and a splinter of a popsicle stick sat empty, overlooking the motionless river. These weren't models, they were exorcisms. Each scene was a silent counter-narrative to the images burned onto his retinas. He wasn't just building a miniature village. He was rebuilding a world shattered by the shriek of incoming fire, creating a quiet place where no one screamed, where the only thing that fell was the gentle rain. They were his quiet prayers for a wholeness he no longer felt, for a peace he had witnessed only in fleeting, desperate moments. And they were a secret, a dialogue between him and his own broken pieces, hidden away where no one ever looked. The afternoon was a lazy, golden affair, the kind that made the city feel distant. Sarah, a 16-year-old with a perpetually curious gaze and headphones that were more an accessory than a source of sound, was having a one-sided argument with her dog. Buster, a golden retriever with the boundless, chaotic energy of a supernova, was supposed to be on a leisurely stroll. Instead, he was on a mission, his nose to the ground, pulling Sarah along in his wake as if he were tracking a fugitive squirrel. "Buster, no, heel," she commanded, but the word was lost in the dog's enthusiastic panting. He veered sharply off the main gravel path of Redemption Grove, his leash pulling taut in Sarah's hand. He plunged headfirst into the dense, untamed foliage behind the composting bins, a place that smelled richly of damp earth and decay. A muffled yip of discovery followed. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Buster," Sarah muttered, pushing aside a low-hanging branch of the privet hedge. "What have you found now? A dead rat?" She ducked under the branch and froze. The world on the other side of the hedge was not what she expected. Buster wasn't chewing on a dead animal. He was standing with uncharacteristic stillness, his head cocked and his tail giving a slow, gentle wag. His nose was just inches away from a tiny, perfect bridge made of rusted wire. Before it, a river of broken blue glass shimmered in the dappled sunlight. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She followed the river with her eyes and saw the cottage made of brick chips, the fortress wall of old rubber, the entire hidden, silent world. It was like stumbling into a fairy tale, not in the pages of a book, but right here, in the most forgotten corner of a public garden. Her gaze lifted from the miniature landscape and found its creator. A man was on his knees a few feet away, his back to her, carefully trimming the thorns from a wild rose stem with a small pair of snips. He wore faded, paint-splattered work pants and a gray t-shirt that had seen better decades. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, completely absorbed in his task. When Buster let out another soft woof, the man's head snapped up. His eyes met Sarah's. They were startlingly pale, a washed-out blue, and for a fleeting second they were wide with a raw, cornered animal panic. He looked from her to the dog, his body tensing as if preparing for a blow. Sarah immediately raised a placating hand, her voice soft. "He won't touch anything. I'm sorry, we didn't mean to trespass." Elias said nothing. His jaw was tight, his face a mask of guarded neutrality that did little to hide the alarm still flickering in his eyes. He watched her, waiting for the inevitable dismissal, the condescending remark about a grown man playing with trash. But Sarah didn't say any of that. She gently pulled Buster back and then, to Elia's surprise, she crouched down. Not in a cursory glance, but with a genuine, absorbed reverence. She leaned in, her eyes tracing the path of the glass river to the tiny cottage. She saw how the sunlight hit the bottle-bottom window, creating that single, perfect spot of light inside. She saw the acorn-capped bench. She saw the care, the patience, the soul embedded in every single piece. After a long moment of silence, she looked up at him, her expression one of pure, unadulterated wonder. She didn't ask, "What is this?" or "What are you doing?" Instead, she whispered, "Is this a story?" The question hung in the quiet air between them. It was a question that bypassed the what and went straight to the why. It acknowledged the intent behind the creation, the narrative heart beating within the collection of junk. It was a question of understanding. For the first time in years, Elias felt seen, not just looked at. The rigid line of his shoulders softened by a fraction. He couldn't find the words to answer, so he simply gave a short, stiff nod. Sarah remained crouched for another minute, her eyes absorbing every detail. The world Elias had built was fragile and beautiful, a testament to a quiet, resilient spirit. It felt deeply personal, and the thought that it was hidden away, unseen by anyone else, struck her as a profound injustice. This wasn't just a hobby, it was art. It was a language, and she had just been granted a glimpse into its grammar. She finally stood, brushing the dirt from her jeans. "It's incredible," she said, her voice still hushed, as if in a library or a church. "Really, it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen." Elias flinched slightly at the direct praise, his gaze dropping back to the rose stem in his hand. Compliments were foreign territory, a language he no longer spoke. He mumbled something that sounded like, "It's nothing, just scraps." "No," Sarah said, with a conviction that surprised even herself. "It's not nothing." She hesitated, then took a small leap of faith. She pulled her phone from her back pocket. The motion was instinctual, a reflex of her generation to capture and share beauty. But as she raised it, she saw Elias' posture stiffen again. A flicker of that initial fear returned to his eyes, this time directed at the small, dark lens of her phone. A sudden, powerful intuition washed over her. He wasn't afraid of her, he was afraid of the camera. She lowered the phone immediately. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. I have this Instagram account. It's called Urban Glimmers. It's silly, really, just pictures of cool things I find around the city. Hidden murals, weird plants growing out of cracks in the sidewalk, that kind of stuff. I thought people should see this. It deserves to be seen." She was careful with her words, making sure her focus was entirely on his creation. "I wouldn't take a picture of you, of course. Just the village, may I?" Elias looked at her, then at the phone in her hand, then back at the miniature world at his feet. A camera. For so long, it had been an extension of his own eye, a tool for capturing truth. Now it was a trigger, a portal to the past. But her phone wasn't a professional-grade SLR. It was small, innocuous. And her eyes, they held no agenda, no predatory gleam of a journalist hunting for a story. They were just filled with a genuine, heartfelt appreciation. He saw that she wasn't trying to expose him, but to celebrate his work. The conflict warred within him, the deep, instinctual revulsion versus the nascent flicker of validation. After a long, tense silence, he gave another short, almost imperceptible nod. Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. With the utmost care, she knelt down and began to photograph his world. She didn't just snap pictures, she composed them. She caught the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the glass river in patterns of light and shadow. She took a close-up of the wire bridge, focusing on a single drop of water from the morning's dew that still clung to its underside, magnifying the rust into a rich, textured landscape. Her final shot was of the cottage, angled just so, capturing the perfect, warm, amber glow that the bottle-bottom window cast upon the floor inside. That evening, sitting on her bed with Buster's head resting on her lap, she uploaded a small gallery of her best shots. She chose her words carefully, wanting to honor the quiet magic she had found. "In a forgotten corner of Redemption Grove Garden," she wrote, "I found a world built from forgotten things. A river of glass, a bridge of wire, a cottage with a window that catches the sun. Each piece is a silent story of resilience and beauty. Found Art Urban Magic Redemption Grove Story and Scraps." She hit share, sending it out to her 437 followers. It was a small gesture, a digital message in a bottle cast into the vast ocean of the internet. She had no idea if anyone would even see it. For the first day, the post received its usual trickle of attention. A dozen likes from Sarah's school friends, a cool from her aunt, a heart emoji from another Urban Explorer account she followed. It was a tiny ripple, just as she'd expected. Elias, meanwhile, continued his silent ritual in the garden, unaware of the digital ghost of his work now floating in the ether. He noticed a few more people than usual wandering down the main path, but no one disturbed his sanctuary. The quiet remained intact. The change came on the second night. A woman named Elena Petrova, the curator of a popular local art blog called Art on the Asphalt, with over 50,000 followers, was scrolling through the Urban Magic tag, looking for inspiration. She swiped past 100 photos of street art and quirky cafe signs before she stopped. It was Sarah's photo of the cottage, the one with the single, perfect beam of amber light cutting through the miniature gloom. It wasn't just a clever photo, it was soulful. It had a narrative depth that most street art, for all its boldness, lacked. Intrigued, Elena clicked on Sarah's profile, saw the other photos, and read the caption. 10 minutes later, she reposted Sarah's gallery to her own feed, adding a single line. "This is why I love this city. True art is everywhere if you only know how to look." Credit. At Urban Glimmers. It was like throwing a match into a dry forest. By morning, Sarah's phone was buzzing incessantly. Her follower count had jumped into the thousands. But more importantly, the comments section on her original post had exploded. These weren't just emojis, they were heartfelt reactions from strangers. "This is more moving than half the stuff I've seen in galleries." The person who made this must have such a gentle soul. Where in Redemption Grove is this? I have to see it for myself. It's like a fairy house for a grown-up's heart. The next day, the digital pilgrimage became a physical one. They came not in a flood, but in a slow, respectful trickle. A young couple holding hands, a student with a sketchbook, a mother and her quiet, wide-eyed son. They didn't cross the invisible boundary into the corner, but stood at its edge, speaking in hushed tones, pointing out the details Sarah's photos had highlighted. Elias, hidden behind the privet hedge, watched them, his body rigid with anxiety. He expected noise, intrusion, judgment. But there was none. They looked, they whispered, they smiled, and they left. Some even left small tributes at the edge of his domain. A small bag of rare sea blue glass, a uniquely twisted piece of driftwood, a smooth, gray river stone. A child left a crayon drawing of the cottage with "Thank you" written in wobbly letters. The turning point came on a crisp Saturday afternoon. An elderly woman, leaning heavily on a carved wooden cane, made her way slowly toward the corner. She didn't stop at the edge. She walked right up to where Elias was kneeling, pretending to be absorbed in weeding. He tensed, preparing to retreat. "You're the artist," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was frail but clear. Elias didn't answer. She gestured with her cane toward the miniature world. "My husband, Frank, he was in the service. Vietnam. He came back, but he never really came home. He spent the rest of his life in his workshop making intricate little ship models. He never sold them. He just needed to make them. He needed a place to put his hands where the world made sense." She looked directly at Elias. Her eyes, clouded with age, were sharp with an unnerving clarity. "Young man," she said softly, "you're not making art out of trash. You are building hope out of broken memories. This reminds me of the best parts of him. The quiet, gentle parts the war couldn't steal." She reached out a trembling hand and patted his shoulder. "Thank you." The words and the simple, compassionate touch were a key turning a lock that had been rusted shut for a decade. They weren't about his skill or his creativity. They were about the shared, silent language of pain and healing. Elias looked up at the old woman, and for the first time in front of a stranger, a smile, small and hesitant but undeniably real, touched his lips. He saw his work reflected in her eyes, not as a curiosity, but as a source of comfort, of connection, of shared humanity. And that feeling, he realized with a sudden, gut-wrenching clarity, was a far greater prize than any award he had ever won. The quiet reverence of the visitors soon echoed in the halls of the city's bureaucracy. The Redemption Grove Garden Management Committee, a group of well-meaning but pragmatic volunteers who had previously viewed Elias Corner as a potential liability, a hoarder's pile, waiting for a cleanup order, found their perspective forcibly changed. Their inbox was flooded with emails praising the hidden art installation. Faced with a wave of unexpected positive press, they didn't just relent, they embraced it. At their next monthly meeting, they unanimously voted not only to preserve the corner, but to officially designate it on the garden map as Elias Corner. They also allocated a small, recurring fund of $50 a month for materials, a gesture that was less about the money and more about a profound, institutional validation of his work. The true transformation, however, came not from a committee, but from a new kind of visitor. A woman named Mrs. Gable, a fourth-grade art teacher from the local elementary school, sought him out one afternoon. She had the cheerful, unflappable energy of someone used to managing controlled chaos. "Mr. Elias," she began, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, "what you do here is pure magic. It's storytelling, it's engineering, and it's the most wonderful example of upcycled art I've ever seen. I was wondering, would you ever consider leading a small weekend workshop for some of my students?" Elias' immediate reaction was a silent, visceral recoil. The thought of being the center of attention, of being responsible for a group of boisterous, unpredictable children, sent a jolt of pure panic through him. The noise, the questions, the sheer overwhelming presence of it all. It was the antithesis of the silent, solitary world he had so carefully constructed. He shook his head, a curt, dismissive gesture, and turned away, hoping she would take the hint. But Sarah, who had become a regular, quiet companion in the garden, had overheard. That evening she found him reinforcing the tire fortress wall. "You should think about it," she said gently. "I can't," he mumbled, not looking at her. "The noise. The people. They're just kids, Elias," she reasoned. "They won't be looking at you with judgment. They'll be looking at you with wonder. You wouldn't have to give a speech. You'd just show them. You'd show them how to see the potential in a bottle cap or the beauty in a broken dish. You'd be teaching them your language." Her words planted a seed of possibility in the barren ground of his fear. Teaching them your language. It wasn't about performance. It was about sharing. After a week of internal struggle, he agreed, on the condition that Sarah would be there to help. The first workshop was terrifying. 10 nine-year-olds descended on his corner, their energy a vibrant, humming force field. Elias felt his throat tighten, his hands begin to sweat. But then Mrs. Gable, with a teacher's practiced wisdom, handed each child a small bag of collected junk. As Elias, his voice barely a whisper at first, picked up a plastic bottle cap and a few twigs and began to show them how to glue them together to form a beetle, something shifted. The children weren't looking at him. They were completely mesmerized by his hands. They watched, utterly captivated, as a piece of trash transformed into a creature. Their own attempts were clumsy, chaotic, and joyful. Soon, the air was filled not with the jarring noises he feared, but with the excited chatter of creation. "Look, mine's a dragonfly. How do you make the wings stay on?" Their laughter wasn't a threat. It was a melody. He found himself moving among them, his initial fear dissolving into a quiet focus as he helped a small boy attach a shard of a mirror to a shell to make a snail. He wasn't capturing moments through a lens anymore. He was standing in the middle of one, helping to shape it. He had found a new way to tell a story, not of a past that haunted him, but of a present that was alive with warmth, peace, and the vibrant, messy, beautiful process of creation. Months later, the late afternoon sun of a warm autumn day cast long, gentle shadows across Redemption Grove. The garden was painted in hues of gold, rust, and deep crimson. Sarah walked down the familiar gravel path, a book tucked under her arm, Buster trotting happily beside her. As she neared the back of the garden, she heard it, the sound that had become the new heartbeat of this once-forgotten corner, the bright, bubbling laughter of children. She peered around the privet hedge, which was now neatly trimmed. Elias' corner had expanded. New, smaller creations, clearly the work of little hands, dotted the landscape around his original village. There were lopsided robots made of tin cans and clumsy, charming animals fashioned from pine cones and pebbles. In the center of it all stood Elias. He was no longer a ghost. He was a quiet sun around which a small solar system of children orbited. He was on one knee, his face etched with a peaceful concentration she had never seen before. A small girl with pigtails stood beside him, watching intently as he showed her how to fit a triangular piece of a broken blue and white porcelain plate onto a cardboard wing. He was helping her build a butterfly. He looked up then, as if sensing her presence, and his eyes met hers across the small clearing. The haunted, washed-out blue was gone. In its place was a depth and a calm that seemed to radiate the warm light of the afternoon. He smiled at her, a full, easy smile that reached his eyes. Then he held up a particularly brilliant shard of cobalt blue glass, catching the sun and making it flash like a sapphire. He held it up for her to see, a shared secret, a piece of treasure. Sarah smiled back, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the autumn sun. The man who had flinched at the sight of her phone was now the patient center of a vibrant, creative world. The silent language he had invented to soothe his own soul was now being taught to a new generation, a legacy of turning broken things into objects of beauty. She knew in that moment that the small, almost thoughtless act of pressing the share button on her phone had done more than just post a picture. It had been a signal flare, sent up from a lonely island that had unexpectedly been seen. It had started a chain reaction of quiet kindness, of community, of healing. It had, in its own small way, helped a lost storyteller find his way home, not by erasing the shadows of his past, but by showing him how to build a new and beautiful story in the light.